I was the one who heard her crying, and I was there to end their cruelty once and for all. The call came at 2:37 in the morning on December 24th, Christmas Eve. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the clock on my nightstand when my phone lit up in the darkness. The number was blocked, but something told me to answer anyway. Grandpa? The voice was so small, so broken, that for a moment I didn't recognize it as belonging to my 10-year-old granddaughter. Sophie? Baby, what's wrong? Where are you? I'm cold. I'm so cold, Grandpa. I'm in the garage, and it's dark, and I can't feel my fingers anymore. Her teeth were chattering so hard, I could barely make out the words. Mommy locked me in here because I accidentally broke Mason's new game controller. She said I needed to learn what it feels like to have nothing. My blood turned to ice, not from the cold, but from pure rage. How long have you been out there? Since dinner. That was, I don't know, a long time ago. Grandpa, I'm scared. My phone is almost dead. I'm using Mason's old phone that I found in a box. Please don't tell Mommy I called you. She said if I bothered anyone on Christmas Eve, the line went dead. I was out of bed in seconds, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. My daughter Rachel had moved 2 hours away after marrying that piece of work Brandon Miller 6 months ago. 2 hours. Sophie had been locked in a freezing garage for God knows how many hours, and I was 2 hours away. I made it in 90 minutes. The Miller house sat on a quiet suburban street, one of those modern constructions that tried too hard to look expensive. Every window blazed with warm yellow light. Through the front bay window, I could see the massive Christmas tree, easily 12 feet tall, covered in what must have been thousands of white lights. Presents were stacked underneath in neat, organized piles. The whole scene looked like something from a holiday catalog. I drove past the house and parked 2 doors down. Then I walked back, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees. 15 degrees, and my granddaughter was locked in an unheated garage wearing God knows what. I went around the side of the house, staying in the shadows. That's when I heard it. A soft, hitching sob coming from the closed garage. I pressed my ear against the side door that led from the garage into the house. Locked from the inside. The main garage door had a small window at the top. I'm 72 years old. But rage gave me strength I didn't know I still had. I found a recycling bin, flipped it over, and climbed up to peer through that window. Sophie was huddled in the far corner, wrapped in what looked like an old moving blanket she must have found. In the dim light from my phone's flashlight, I could see her lips had a bluish tint. Her whole body was shaking. I climbed down and tried the main garage door. It was locked, of course. But I'm not just any grandfather. I'm a grandfather who spent 35 years as a corporate attorney before I retired. And I'm a grandfather who learned long ago that sometimes you have to break a few rules to protect the people you love. I picked up a decorative garden stone from their landscaping and smashed the window of the side door. The glass shattered with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet neighborhood. I reached through, unlocked the door, and stepped into their garage. Sophie, baby, it's Grandpa. I'm here. She looked up at me with eyes that were too old for a 10-year-old child. I crossed to her in 3 strides, pulled off my heavy winter coat, and wrapped it around her tiny, shivering body. She weighed almost nothing. When had she gotten so thin? Can you walk, sweetheart? She nodded, but when she tried to stand, her legs buckled. I caught her and lifted her into my arms. She buried her face against my shoulder and started to cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet, exhausted tears that broke my heart into pieces. That's when the interior door burst open and my daughter stood there, backlit by the warm glow of her perfect house. She was wearing a festive red sweater with actual bells sewn onto it and holding a glass of wine. Dad, what are you doing here? How did you? Her eyes went to the broken window, then to Sophie in my arms. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, guilt, then, incredibly, anger. You broke into our house? I saved my granddaughter from dying of hypothermia in your garage. My voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm I used to use in court when I was about to destroy the opposing counsel. Where's your husband? Brandon is putting the kids to bed. Dad, you don't understand. Sophie has been having behavioral issues. She needs to learn. She needs to learn what? Exactly? How to survive being locked in a freezing garage for 8 hours on Christmas Eve? I adjusted Sophie in my arms. She had stopped shivering, which wasn't a good sign. Get out of my way, Rachel. You can't just take her. I'm her mother. Watch me. Brandon appeared behind Rachel, his face flushed from alcohol or anger. Probably both. He was one of those men who peaked in high school football and never quite got over it. 42 years old, and still wearing his varsity leather jacket around the house like it meant something. Mr. Peterson, with all due respect, this is our home, and Sophie is our daughter. You're trespassing. I looked at him the way I used to look at junior associates who thought they could bluff their way through a deposition. With all due respect, Mr. Miller, you just committed child abuse and endangerment. I'm a retired attorney, and I know exactly what I'm looking at here. So here's what's going to happen. I'm taking Sophie to the hospital to get checked out. Then I'm taking her home with me. And tomorrow morning, you're going to find a very detailed complaint filed with Child Protective Services, along with photos, medical records, and a recording of the phone call she made to me from your garage. Rachel's face went white. You can't do that. She's my daughter. She's a child who was locked in a garage in 15-degree weather as punishment for accidentally breaking a toy. Yes, Rachel, I can do that. And I will. This is ridiculous. Brandon stepped forward, trying to intimidate me with his size. Sophie was being dramatic. We were going to let her back in after an hour. She needed to learn respect. An hour? I held Sophie tighter. According to her phone's timestamp, she called me at 2:37 a.m. She said you locked her in after dinner. What time was dinner, Brandon? 6 o'clock? 7? You left a 10-year-old child in an unheated garage for 8 hours in below-freezing temperatures. That's not discipline. That's attempted murder. Don't be ridiculous. Rachel's voice was shrill now. We were going to let her back in. We forgot. We were busy with Mason and Brittany's Christmas Eve traditions. And you forgot about your own daughter? I started moving toward the door that led from the garage to the driveway. Tell me, Rachel, when exactly did you become a monster? Behind Rachel, two faces appeared in the doorway. Mason and Brittany, Brandon's kids from his first marriage. They looked at Sophie in my arms, then at their father, then quickly looked away. They knew. Of course they knew. In houses like this, everyone knows. They just don't say anything. I carried Sophie past all of them, out through the broken door, across their perfectly manicured lawn to my truck. I had left it running with the heat on full blast. I secured her in the passenger seat, fastening the seatbelt around her and my coat. Grandpa, will I get in trouble for calling you? No, baby. You did exactly the right thing. You're not in trouble. You're never going to be in trouble again. She fell asleep before we got to the hospital, her small hand gripping my sleeve like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. The emergency room doctor took one look at her and immediately called for warming blankets and hot fluids. Stage 1, hypothermia, he said. Another hour, and we'd be looking at serious nerve damage. Maybe worse. He took photos of the bruises on her arms that I hadn't even noticed yet. Old bruises, in various stages of healing. He asked quiet questions that I answered in a steady voice, while my hands shook with fury. He called Child Protective Services himself. By the time Sophie was admitted for overnight observation, there were already wheels in motion. I called my attorney at 4 a.m. on Christmas Day. Edward Chen had been my partner for 20 years before we both retired. He answered on the second ring. Talk to me. I told him everything. When I finished, there was a long silence. You know what you're asking me to do? I know exactly what I'm asking. Emergency custody hearings during Christmas week are going to be expensive and complicated. I don't care about expensive. And complicated is what we do best. Another pause. I'll make some calls. Meet me at my office tomorrow at 9. And Michael? Bring everything. Photos, medical records, that phone recording if you saved it. We're going to need it all. I had saved it. I'm old. Not stupid. The second that call ended, I had already backed up the audio file to 3 different cloud services. Sophie woke up around 7 a.m. as the sun was starting to rise. The color had returned to her face, and she was no longer shaking. I was sitting in the chair next to her bed, and when she opened her eyes, the first thing she did was smile at me. "Merry Christmas, Grandpa. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Are we in trouble?" "We're not in trouble, but I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to tell me the truth. Can you do that?" She nodded. "How long has this been happening?" She looked down at her hands. "Since Mommy married Brandon." At first it was just little things. Like, I wasn't allowed to eat certain foods because they were for Mason and Brittany, or I had to ask permission to use the bathroom. But then it got worse. Worse how? Brandon said I was ungrateful, that Mommy had given me a new family, and I didn't appreciate it. He said I needed to learn my place. She picked at the hospital blanket. When I did something wrong, they started making me sit in the garage, just for a little while at first, but then longer and longer. "Did your mother know?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "She was there, Grandpa. She was the one who locked the door. We spent Christmas Day at my house. I made pancakes and hot chocolate. We watched old movies and didn't talk about the garage or her mother or what came next. We just existed together in the warm safety of my home. And that was enough." The next morning, Edward and I sat across from each other at his desk while he spread out document after document. Police reports, CPS reports, medical records, photos that made my stomach turn. "This is worse than you told me," Edward said quietly. "I didn't know how bad it was. They're going to fight this. You know that. Brandon Miller has money, connections. Your daughter is going to hire the best attorney she can find. Let them fight." I leaned back in my chair. "I have something they don't have." Edward raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "The truth. And 40 years of experience destroying people who hurt children." The emergency custody hearing was set for 2 days later. In the meantime, I had temporary custody of Sophie, and Rachel was allowed 1 supervised phone call per day. She didn't call, but Brandon's attorney called me. David Worthington, one of those lawyers who specializes in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. I took his call in my study while Sophie was upstairs doing homework. "Mr. Peterson, I think we can resolve this situation without involving the courts. I'm listening. My clients are willing to acknowledge that perhaps their disciplinary methods were a bit harsh. They're prepared to attend family counseling and modify their parenting approach. In exchange, they'd like Sophie returned to their home and for you to drop the CPS complaint." No. There was a pause. "I don't think you understand the position you're in. You're a 72-year-old man trying to get custody of a 10-year-old girl. The courts favor parents, Mr. Peterson. Even parents who make mistakes. Locking a child in a freezing garage for 8 hours isn't a mistake, Mr. Worthington. It's felony child abuse. And I'm not just a 72-year-old man. I'm a retired attorney with a perfect record in family court cases. I know every judge in this county. I've had lunch with half of them. So here's my counteroffer. Your clients agree to supervised visitation only, attend a minimum of 6 months of parenting classes, and submit to random home inspections by CPS, or I take everything I have and I bury them. Those terms are unreasonable. Then I'll see you in court." I hung up. Edward, who had been listening on speaker, whistled low. "You really think Judge Martinez will give you full custody?" "I know she will. I handled her divorce 15 years ago. Pro bono." She remembers. The hearing was in Judge Patricia Martinez's courtroom at 9 a.m. on December 28th. Rachel showed up with David Worthington and a woman I didn't recognize. Brandon was wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. They looked confident, prepared, like they already knew they were going to win. They hadn't met Edward Chen in court before. Edward opened with the medical records. Photos of Sophie's bruises, displayed on a screen large enough that everyone in the courtroom could see them in vivid detail. Then he played the audio of Sophie's phone call to me. Her small, terrified voice filled the courtroom. "I'm cold. I'm so cold, Grandpa." I watched Rachel's face as she listened to her daughter's voice. Watched her lawyer lean over and whisper something urgent. Watched Brandon's confidence start to crack. Then Edward called his first witness, Dr. Sarah Kim, the emergency room physician who had treated Sophie. "In your medical opinion, Dr. Kim, what would have happened if Mr. Peterson had not arrived when he did?" Sophie was in stage 1 hypothermia when she arrived at the hospital. Based on the ambient temperature that night and the length of time she was exposed, if she had remained in that garage another hour, we would have been looking at stage 2 hypothermia, potential organ damage, possibly death. And the bruises you documented? Multiple contusions in various stages of healing, suggesting repeated physical trauma over an extended period of time. The pattern is consistent with grab marks and impact injuries. "Thank you, Dr. Kim." Worthington tried to cross-examine, but Dr. Kim was unshakable. "Medical facts don't lie." Then Edward did something I hadn't expected. He called Mason Miller to the stand, Brandon's 13-year-old son. The boy walked to the witness stand like he was walking to his own execution. "Mason, I know this is difficult," Edward said gently, "but I need to ask you some questions about what you've seen in your home. You understand you're under oath?" "Yes, sir." "Have you seen your stepmother discipline Sophie?" Mason's eyes flicked to his father. "Can you describe what that discipline looked like?" Objection. Worthington stood. "The child is being asked to testify against his father. The child is being asked to tell the truth," Judge Martinez said coolly. Mason took a shaky breath. "Sometimes Sophie had to sit in the garage. My dad said it was because she was ungrateful and needed to learn respect. He said she was lucky they let her live in the house at all." "Did you ever tell anyone about this?" "I tried to tell my mom once. My real mom. But Dad found out and said, if I ever talked about what happened in our house to anyone, he'd make sure I couldn't see her anymore. So I stopped." Brandon was on his feet. "That's a lie. That's a damned lie, and you know it." Judge Martinez's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Miller, sit down and be quiet, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." Edward called 2 more witnesses, a neighbor who had heard shouting from the Miller house on multiple occasions, a teacher from Sophie's school who testified that the child had become withdrawn and anxious since the remarriage. By the time Worthington stood up to present his case, the damage was done. He called Rachel to the stand. "Mrs. Miller, can you explain what happened on Christmas Eve?" Rachel had been crying. Her makeup was streaked and she looked small in the witness chair. Sophie had been having behavioral problems. Talking back. Breaking things. "My husband and I decided that traditional discipline wasn't working. We thought if she spent some time alone, she'd realize how good she had it." "And you intended to bring her back inside?" "Of course. We got busy with the other children. It was Christmas Eve, and there was so much to do. We honestly forgot she was out there until my father broke into our house and took her." "So you're saying this was an accident?" "Yes. A terrible accident. I love my daughter. I would never intentionally hurt her." Edward stood for cross-examination. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mrs. Miller, you said you forgot Sophie was in the garage?" "Yes. For 8 hours? We were busy. Busy enough that you forgot you had locked your 10-year-old daughter in an unheated garage in 15-degree weather on Christmas Eve? It was an accident. An accident." Edward walked to the evidence table and picked up a printed photo. "This is a photo of your Christmas tree taken the next day by CPS investigators." "The one with Sophie's name on it?" Rachel looked at the photo. "Yes. So you remembered to buy Sophie a present. You remembered to wrap it. You remembered to put it under the tree. But you forgot that you had locked her in the garage?" I don't. Let me ask you this, Mrs. Miller. In the 8 hours that Sophie was locked in your garage, how many times did you check on her?" Silence. "How many times did you bring her food? Water? A blanket?" More silence. "Not once. Because you didn't forget, did you? You just didn't care." Objection. Worthington was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Judge Martinez looked at Edward. Move on, counselor. But the damage was done. I could see it in the judge's face. In the way the court reporter had stopped typing and was just staring at Rachel with undisguised disgust. Edward called one final witness. Me. I told the story simply. The phone call. The drive. Finding Sophie huddled in the corner, blue-lipped and shaking. The broken window. The hospital. The fear in my granddaughter's eyes when she asked if she was in trouble. Mr. Peterson, Edward said. Why are you seeking custody of Sophie? Because she's not safe in that house. Because my daughter has become someone I don't recognize. Because Sophie called me in the middle of the night and begged for help. And I will not send her back to a place where she has to beg for basic human dignity. Are you prepared to take on the responsibility of raising a 10-year-old child at your age? I'm 72 years old. I have a paid-off house, a full pension, excellent health, and 40 years of experience loving that little girl. Yes, I'm prepared. More than that, I'm committed. Sophie deserves someone who will put her first, always, no matter what. Judge Martinez called for a recess. We waited in a conference room while she reviewed the evidence. Sophie sat next to me, holding my hand so tight I thought she might break my fingers. What if I have to go back? She whispered. You're not going back. But what if the judge says I have to? Then we'll figure something else out. But Sophie, I promise you, you are never spending another night in that garage. Do you understand me? Never. 30 minutes later, we were back in the courtroom. Judge Martinez looked at Rachel and Brandon for a long moment before she spoke. I've been on the bench for 18 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of cases involving parental rights and child welfare. This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've ever seen. She looked down at her notes. Mrs. Miller, I believe you when you say you love your daughter. I do. But I also believe that you allowed your new husband to create an environment where your daughter was treated as less than human. You participated in that treatment. You locked her in a garage in freezing temperatures, and you forgot about her. Not for 5 minutes, not for half an hour, for 8 hours. Rachel was crying now. Brandon sat stone-faced beside her. Mr. Miller, your testimony today revealed a pattern of emotional abuse and manipulation, not just toward Sophie, but toward your own children. The fact that your 13-year-old son was too afraid to speak to his own mother about what was happening in your home tells me everything I need to know about the kind of man you are. Judge Martinez looked at me. Mr. Peterson, I'm granting you temporary full custody of Sophie Elizabeth Peterson, effective immediately. Mrs. Miller, you will be allowed supervised visitation once per week, at a location to be determined by CPS. Mr. Miller, you will not be present for these visitations. Both of you will complete a minimum of 6 months of parenting classes and family counseling before we revisit custody arrangements. CPS will conduct monthly home inspections. If at any point I find that Sophie is in danger, I will terminate parental rights permanently. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Rachel whispered. Brandon said nothing. We're adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Sophie threw her arms around my waist and held on like she'd never let go. Edward stood next to us, briefcase in hand, looking satisfied. Thank you, I told him. Don't thank me. You did the hard part. I just presented the evidence. That night, I made Sophie's favorite dinner, spaghetti with meatballs and garlic bread. We ate at my small kitchen table, the one that had been there since my wife passed away 5 years ago. Sophie had 3 helpings and fell asleep on the couch halfway through the movie we were watching. I carried her up to the guest room, which was now officially her room. I had already started painting it, sky blue with white clouds, because she said she wanted to feel like she was sleeping outside under the stars. The furniture was simple but sturdy, a bed with a thick comforter, a desk for homework, a bookshelf that I planned to fill with whatever books she wanted. I tucked her in and turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Grandpa, yeah, sweetheart, do you think Mommy will ever be sorry? I sat on the edge of her bed. I don't know. I hope so. But Sophie, whether she's sorry or not, that's not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to be a kid, to do your homework and play with your friends and maybe help me with the dishes sometimes. That's it. Everything else, all the adult stuff, all the complicated feelings and legal battles and family drama, that's my job. Okay? Okay. She was quiet for a moment. Grandpa? I'm glad you answered the phone. So am I, baby. So am I. 3 months later, Rachel called and asked if she could see Sophie outside of the supervised visits. I said no. 2 months after that, she called again. This time her voice was different, clearer. She told me she had left Brandon, filed for divorce, moved into an apartment downtown, started therapy. She wanted to know if there was any chance at all, that I might consider shared custody someday. I told her the truth. Maybe. Someday. But not today. Today, Sophie needed stability. She needed to know that the people who loved her weren't going to change their minds or forget about her or lock her in a garage when she made a mistake. She needed to heal. And healing takes time, Rachel cried. But she didn't argue. That was progress, I suppose. As for Sophie, she's doing better. She still has nightmares sometimes. Still flinches when someone raises their voice. But she's laughing more. Playing more. Being a kid more. She joined the school choir and discovered she loves to sing. She made friends with a girl down the street who has a golden retriever. She helps me make dinner every night, and we do homework together at the kitchen table. Last week, she asked me if she could call me Dad instead of Grandpa. I told her she could call me whatever made her happy. She thought about it for a while and decided to stick with Grandpa. Because you're the best grandpa in the world, she said. And I don't want you to be anything else. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel and a verdict. Sometimes it comes in the form of a middle-of-the-night phone call from a scared little girl. Sometimes it's a broken window and a warm coat. Sometimes it's choosing to fight when everyone tells you to walk away. And sometimes, justice is just showing up, being there, answering the phone, proving that love doesn't forget, doesn't give up, doesn't lock you in a garage, and pretend you don't exist. I'm 72 years old. I thought I was done raising children. But if I've learned anything in my 7 decades on this planet, it's that we're never done. We're never too old to fight for what's right. We're never too tired to answer the call when someone needs us. Sophie needed me. And I showed up. That's all any of us can do, really. Show up, fight, love fiercely, and protect relentlessly. And when the night is cold and dark, and someone you love is crying out for help, you answer the phone. Every single time.